welcome to week 3. Week 3, the chapter is about ethics and the foundation of partnering relationships that create value. And I think this is the heart of what is a problem with the perception of salespeople. And it has tainted sales and why a lot of people struggle, I think, with sales, other than people who are introverts and just feel uncomfortable with being able to talk to other people and finding ways to be able to find that bond. But ethics is at the heart of selling information and selling products, because when you're buying, and you may hear the term called buyer beware. Well, how can you beware if you're not aware of things? So when you're looking at the chapter, you're going to be looking at the fact that explain the importance of developing the relationship strategy. So understanding like how that happens and how you define yourself as a salesperson, or how a company defines the sales role. Then we'll discuss, describing issues that challenge the ethical decision making of salespeople. And there are a lot of things. There's people like myself. I am extremely ethical to a fault. I have gone against what my employers want me to do because I know in my gut what feels right and what doesn't feel right when I'm in the sales role. There's also describing the factors that influence the ethical conduct of a salesperson. This is a lot of what the individual, so sometimes companies can have very strict rules and the salesperson will do their own thing, and that can go against what the company policies are, and what they are doing, and can be very unethical. This chapter will describe how ethical decisions influence the building of a partnership relationship in selling. And then finally it'll discuss the guidelines for developing a personal code of ethics that creates value, because you can do that. And that is where we are shifting now in the sales process, where people either are aligning themselves with companies that are very ethical, have ethical policies, ethical practices. And then there are people who, as salespeople, have decided that if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure that I am addressing my own ethics and my code of ethics. So the first on chapter 51, if you again follow the map for the different chapters depending on the version that you're on, but we want to talk about emotional intelligence. And I know I'm going to kind of date myself a bit, but you can go do the research on this if you'd like. But many of you may know King Charles of England, and his former wife, Princess Diana. And the reason why I'm asking you to go out and look at this case study when it comes to defining what is emotional intelligence, because this is what guides your instincts as a business person and or a professional, is that King Charles went to King's College, which is at Cambridge, where I attended. So I understand the pomp and circumstance of the history that goes into saying that you've gone to King's College. I didn't go to King's College, but it's revered of all of the colleges at Cambridge. And he went there. So did Sir Isaac Newton. So very prestigious. And he's more of an academic, very scholarly, has that kind of intelligence, probably well-read, and everything that would define yourself as being a very intelligent person. Well, Lady Diana was not. She was of a royal family, or the royalty, and the peerage. So she was actually a lady. Her father was an earl, and she was not well educated. She really struggled with college, was really more into dancing and the arts, and didn't do well and didn't perform well in school. And yet she was killed probably, I think it's maybe 25 years ago now, or maybe 20 years ago. And we still talk about her today because she had what's called an emotional intelligence that was able to connect with a nation of people, and arguably a global nation of people, that really felt like they knew her. She was known for touching AIDS patients at a time that no one would touch them because the disease was still so new. She's known for going out and walking through landmine areas where, during conflict they put landmines, and as people try to repopulate those areas, it's dismembering people. So she really was, and one of the very simple thing that she did, barring her, activism, was that when she would meet people in hospitals, she always would crouch down next to their wheelchairs or their beds. Why? So that she was eye level with them. And that is how she is revered even today after her death, and still causes trouble for Charles in his new marriage with Camilla, because she was able to connect with people on such a level, even through television, or the way she would speak, because she had an emotional intelligence. And that is the value of emotional intelligence, especially in salespeople and how you connect with people. So when you read through the emotional intelligence, realize that's really where you're starting to follow your gut instincts. You're watching people's nonverbal behaviors. If they shift their eyes, that may tell you that they're uncomfortable. You react by pulling back. Those are all of the cues that you use when you're selling to be able to have an emotional intelligence versus just an intelligence that you might have about your product or service that you're selling. There's also cultural issues. For example, I think in my bio, I've let everybody know I went to India and I've worked for Indian-based companies here in the United States. They are culturally different. Even though they may have come to the United States and they may be Americanized, there are still things that they do that are different than the way Americans react. And especially in how companies developed, I've actually turned down working for an Indian-based company because they were telling me, oh, well, these are the numbers that you have to hit, but don't worry, we understand that there was a global slowdown. You won't have to be accounted for these numbers. But I was going to have to sign an employment agreement agreeing to those numbers. And I just knew they were never going to take their numbers down and modify them. They would have already done that if they had any intentions of doing that. So they were gonna, if I had accepted that job, I would have had to work to unreasonable efforts to try to get sales. And there were some other issues of why I turned it down. So there's cultural issues as well. But I think in the biggest chapter, besides the legal issues, you'll want to read that. But going into where they really start to bring home the idea of the influence of a company's policies and practices. And we see that a lot with companies. My mom, even at General Motors, they had a policy where you couldn't, and still can't, accept gifts from vendors over $20. So they've said $20 is enough for a meal, for someone to buy you something. But my mom was always getting wine, gifts, vacations, and that's to, in a way, buy influence. Now, my mom was of an ethical nature that it didn't influence her buying decision, but it does with other people. So the book discusses sharing confidential information. We've seen that now with when you are, let's say, going to a utility like a Comcast or let's say DTE here in Michigan. We now know that they've been selling their list of subscribers, addresses, phone numbers, and things like that behind the scenes. Now we have privacy policies that have gone in place because we found out about it, but now our information is already out there on the dark web. So, sharing confidential information is a company policy. Reciprocity. If you do something for me, I'll do something for you. That's also an integrity issue, an ethical issue. So is bribery, obviously. That is illegal. Gift giving, as I mentioned with my mom. Entertainment, as I mentioned with my mom. Paying to take your, you go to the sweet box at, let's say, the Palace, I was going to say the old Palace, but at any of these entertainment arenas, if you take your clients there, that can also be considered, a questionable item. Maybe not unethical. It depends on what you're asking or what you expect from that gift, but it is something that can be in that gray area. And then the use of the internet. Those are other areas where how companies use the internet to be able to give salespeople advantages. So there's a lot of areas, and so when you read through this ethical issue in this chapter, start to really feel like these things are being addressed, because now companies can take a stance of either being unethical or being ethical. So companies are doing that, but what this chapter also discusses is how you as a salesperson are going to choose to be ethical. Are you going to sell something that they really don't need because you need the sale and the commission? Are you going to sell a product that has complaints from other people and that there are known issues? Do you continue to sell it? So those are some of the things that you have to think about. Or let's say you find out that somebody just lost a spouse and you continue to sell even though you know that they're emotionally compromised. Those are the kinds of things that a salesperson has to start to think about when they're developing their own value system. Am I going to cross that line? Many people do, but many people don't. So when you read through this chapter, realize that ethics, more than ever before, is coming to the forefront in companies as well as in the practices of salespeople.